It's now time to dig the sweet potatoes here in our vegetable garden. And although we could wait until the first frost blackens the leaves, we're going to go ahead and dig them now because they've been growing here for about 4.5 months and they should be ready for harvest. The sweet potatoes are native to warm tropical areas of Central and South America, so they need a pretty long growing season to produce a crop. Sweet potatoes are closely related to morning glories. In fact, they're in the same genus, Ipomoe. You can see on these sweet potatoes growing on our support here that the leaves and stems do look similar to the morning glories. Well, the first thing we need to do is cut away all this foliage, and I'll start cutting down here, but just first want to tell you that we grew our sweet potatoes on this trellis this year just so they wouldn't take up as much room in the garden and spread out everywhere. They probably would have swallowed the herbs that we have growing nearby if we didn't have them on this trellis. We set these 4x4s in the ground really firmly and then attached this electric fence wire, but we probably should have gone with something a little stronger than the electric fence wire. Something like clothesline wire or some kind of small cable would have been a little better. They've actually pulled down some of the wires with their really heavy weight. Well, so we can see where we're digging when we're harvesting these. I'm going to have to remove all this top growth, so I'm just going to take my head shears and just clear away all of these sweet potato vines. A little bit of a challenge to cut these away without cutting the wire with the head shears, but trying to be somewhat careful so we don't damage one of our garden tools here. There's sometimes a bit of confusion about just what is a sweet potato and what is a yam. A true yam is a plant that is produced from the fleshy roots of plants in the Dioscoraceae, a family native to tropical countries in Africa. We rarely see true yams available for sale here in the United States. Maybe occasionally in some of the urban Hispanic markets you'll find true yams, but very rarely do we see them in our supermarkets and grocery stores. And we certainly wouldn't be able to grow true yams in Oklahoma. Being from the tropics, they need about an 8 to 10 month warm growing season in order to produce a crop. So we hardly ever see the true yams. A lot of the confusion comes from the fact that earlier in the century, a group of sweet potato producers from the state of Louisiana attached the word yam to some new varieties of sweet potatoes that were being developed. These new varieties were larger, they had deep orange, moist flesh, and so it was just a marketing ploy to distinguish these new varieties from the traditional smaller white-fleshed sweet potatoes. So the name yam for sweet potatoes is kind of hung around, and today in a lot of supermarkets we do see the terms used interchangeably. The United States Department of Agriculture, however, now requires any sweet potato with the label of yam also must contain the word sweet potato along with it, just to kind of help cut down some of the confusion. Well, now that we've got most of these vines cleared away here, you can see the bermed up or hilled area where we planted the slips of our sweet potatoes back in the spring of this year. They've grown quite a bit. You can see the large stems right here. Of course, sweet potatoes require a very well-drained soil. That's why we did the hilling or the berming of this area. And they prefer really a soil that is very loose, such as a sandy loam soil. And if they don't get really good drainage, you can have problems of misshapen roots or roots that are cracked or that have very rough skin. So raised beds or bermed or hilled up areas are really the best place to grow the sweet potatoes. Well, I'm just going to take the shovel here and start digging for our sweet potatoes. It's always quite exciting to dig into the soil and see what we've got underneath there. Kind of like digging potatoes. Of course, sweet potatoes, unlike our regular potatoes, are not tubers. They don't have eyes. See a nice sized sweet potato right here. This is the variety Centennial. It's probably the most popular variety of sweet potato in the United States. Another very popular variety is one called Jewel. But the varieties Jewel and Centennial are highly recommended varieties for Oklahoma. A smaller one right there. A little piece of a root. I can see some larger ones right over here. Important thing to remember when you're digging sweet potatoes is to try to be gentle with them. In fact, a lot of people say to handle them as if they were eggs. And you don't want to throw them around or step on them or bang into them a lot with a shovel or anything like that. And that's because their skins will bruise very easily. That's one of the reasons I'm wearing the cotton gloves, is while I'm handling the sweet potatoes, I won't rough them up any more than I have to. Of course, another reason I'm wearing the cotton gloves is to keep a lot of the sticky sap from those vines and the roots that I cut into from getting all over my hands. We're going to not leave our sweet potatoes out in the sun very long, and that's because if they're out in the bright sunlight for as little as 30 minutes, we can actually start having some sun scalding problems. For that reason, some people will dig their sweet potatoes at dusk. That way they're not out in the light very long. Got a little close on these, kind of chopped through them a little bit. Those slips were planted a little further out from the mound there. Just step down here, see what we got underneath. These are vines. It's a nice one. We do have just a little bit of scarring on some of the sweet potatoes, probably from wireworms or some grubs feeding in the area. Of course, those areas we'll probably toss this one out, but we don't have a lot of the sweet potato weevil problems like some of the southern states do. We do have them in Oklahoma, but they're not really a big problem. Well, I'll continue to dig these up. We'll see how many we get. Then the next process will be to take them somewhere where they can cure. We did have a little bit of damage from wireworms and grubs while we were digging our sweet potatoes, and just wanted to show you a wireworm we found. We were gathering them up. Right here's one of the little culprits. You can see the damage right here where they burrowed in. But the wireworm is a very solid, very shiny type of insect. It's the larvae of a type of beetle, but very segmented, interesting little color. Sometimes these are white, sometimes they're black. An interesting little creature. They don't do just a great deal of damage. We can just easily cut that away from the sweet potato and it'll be just fine. Well, the curing process for the sweet potatoes is very important for several reasons. It allows a protective barrier to be formed on the outer periphery of the sweet potato. It helps protect the sweet potato from decay pathogens, and it also enables the sweet potato to hold in moisture so they don't dry out as fast, and it just allows them to store for a greater period of time. The curing process is also important because it makes the sweet potatoes sweeter. During the curing process, a lot of the starches in the sweet potato will be converted into sugars, so they're going to end up tasting better. Well, we've brought our sweet potatoes into this part of our garden barn here, and the place where you do the curing needs to be definitely out of the sun. Garden shed, a small barn, or maybe a closet off your garage or somewhere like that is important. It also needs to be a place where you can raise the temperature. That's because sweet potatoes need to cure for about 7 to 10 days at some pretty high temperatures. 80 to 90 degrees is optimum. So one way to increase the temperature is to get some sort of a shop light, and in a small closet set up your sweet potatoes in a basket or a box and just leave a light on like that. You can definitely feel that light coming off of there, and that'll heat up to at least 80-85 degrees, and these will cure very well. It's also important to have high humidity in the place where you're curing your sweet potatoes. Of course, out of the wind is important, but if you want to set up some buckets of water to also increase that humidity, that's a good idea. We've also got a little tray with some gravel that we've wet down also to keep that humidity pretty high. Well, after your sweet potatoes have cured, you can store them at room temperature, and definitely one thing you don't want to do is put them in the refrigerator, as they can have chilling injury at as low as 55 degrees. So don't put them in the fridge. Well, sweet potatoes are very nutritious. They're very high in vitamins A and C. They're a good source of iron, a good source of fiber, and they're very high in beta-carotene. I have sort of a family history with the sweet potato. My dad tells me stories of when he was growing up and how they would raise acres and acres of sweet potatoes. And he tells me of the large chore it was to dig them in the fall. They actually stored them in a rock structure that they built, and they would put a wood-burning stove in there to heat it up so they could cure very well. But they had plenty of sweet potatoes through the wintertime, even fed some to their livestock. So lots of people enjoy growing sweet potatoes. They're, again, not true yams. They're not a tuber like a regular potato. They are rewarding to grow, they're very tasty, and they're very nutritious.